I'm
Did we
not.
do it?
We did, but I don't think
All
I did
right.
it as good as Johnny does it.
Oh, okay.
I think that was fine. It was
It's good.
sufficient.
It's good enough.
Good
Yes.
enough.
Yes. It's sufficient.
All right. Good morning, GitOpsians. I really just want to take a moment and show off my coffee mug today.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah,
It's left-handed. Is it left-handed?
it is. It
Okay.
is. It's actually an ambidextrous coffee mug. So
Oh, okay. So
the
that's good.
design
Yeah.
is on both sides. I think maybe my camera is mirrored or not mirrored or something. So I don't know if you could actually read it. It says my job here is done.
It is backwards. Yes, it's mirrored. But
Yeah.
thank you for the translation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Sailor Moon mug. Anyway, my husband
Yeah.
bought me a couple fun Sailor Moon mugs, and I just had to grab this one because I think this is perfect for the armchair coding I'm about to do over your shoulder.
Yes, exactly.
Really on theme. A couple quick announcements before we jump into your little primer on monitoring and ArgoCD. The first is a very personal thing for me. So as some longtime viewers might know, I've been running a global DEI community with a colleague, and we do a couple events a month rather. We usually do a webinar. So I've got one coming up about debugging. And then we also have something called a Coding Coaches Coffee Hour, which is like a never recorded, ask all your stupid questions, get a demo from somebody who like really knows something well type of situation. And that's been going pretty awesome. I've been running the program for 3 years, and I've started getting like guest coding coaches in. So for like a long time, it was really just like me and like one of my co-leads. Now we're getting some guest coding coaches in, and so I made us a GitHub repo.
Nice.
And this is just some of the stuff that has already been gone over in the community is being put in here. If you're curious, like to know what types of things and demos and stuff that community is getting, but also, it's open for pull requests. So if you can think of something that's like a great learning resource, or if you can put together a little demo on a technology, even if you don't ever want to come present it to the community, which you totally could do, just email me and I'll get you set up. Even if you want to just do anything, kind of give back, this is a way to do it that is very near and dear to my heart. So yeah, that is in the chat, and that's it right there.
Sweet.
So that's that announcement. Like I said, very little bit of a personal one. On the GitOps front, though, Christian, I think the committee is announcing the accepted CFPs for ArgoCon soon.
Yes, that's happening on Monday. So if you submitted a CFP to ArgoCon, I know the KubeCon notifications went out, and they're like, "Hey, what happened to ArgoCon?" It's like the co-located always trails the KubeCon ones for various reasons, but yeah. So the notifications are coming out on this Monday. So what's really cool is that we're kind of talking beforehand. It's like, hey, if you got a notification and that your talk was declined, there's other platforms to be able to do your presentation. I think this is a good platform. I know Hilliary is always looking. Yeah.
I would love people to come and give their talk. So I was on the committee, right? So Christian was a chair, and I was on like the committee of people that reviewed the CFPs for ArgoCon. And they were so good. I honestly did not envy you that decision because there were so many excellent talks. So I will say, having reviewed every submitted talk, if your talk wasn't accepted, it wasn't because it wasn't excellent.
Yes, exactly.
It really wasn't. It has nothing to do with that. However, if your talk wasn't accepted, I will I'll post a link to put out a call. Please tell me. I even included my email address, which I never do.
Yes,
please
exactly.
Tell me that you would like to present it on GitOps Guide to the Galaxy, and I will set up a date and time with you. So
yeah, it's always hard. You're right. It's a lot of the times folks will reach out to me saying, "Hey, my talk got declined. Is there anything that I could have done in the future for it to be accepted?" And it just sucks, but the answer is no. Because it's not because it's so good. Your CFP is so good, but there are just so many good ones. It's just like we just can't accept them all. And so a lot of the times it isn't because it isn't good. It's actually fantastic. And I know Hilliary would love to have some of these topics on.
100%. Like, if it were ethical, I would be emailing you all. It's not.
Yes.
So I won't.
Yeah.
Like, but if it were ethical, I would be directly reaching out. It's not, so I won't. Anyway, but so that said, that was it for the announcements on my end. Except for Gerald. Gerald, if your talks didn't get accepted, I'll reach out to you. We work together. That doesn't count.
Yeah, Gerald. Yeah. Well, Gerald should just be on regularly anyway.
Yeah.
We should actually. We're having this side conversation, Gerald and I, about something up in the Argo community. It'd be interesting, like, to have him on and have a point counterpoint or between two ferns type of conversation where we just sit here and argue with each other for an hour. I think that'd be cool.
That would be pretty fun. That would be pretty fun.
that would be awesome.
Yeah, we actually, I think, are a little bit overdue on. So there was a comment on the last stream from somebody who was like, "I don't understand this stream. Like, I was hoping to learn about Argo, and I didn't get it." And I realized, like, there's a degree to which we're just assuming we have the same people watching that have been watching for the last 4 years that the stream has been running. 4 years now. I think we're overdue to redo some primers and be like, hey, like, this is what ArgoCD is. This is what it means. Just like do it all again. Do it with like kind of the latest versions of things. A lot of it's not any different, but some of it has changed. So I think we're a little bit overdue. So I might start. I'm not going to do that. We're getting to the end of the year, but I might kick off the new year.
Yeah,
I love end of August is the end of the year in my head. But I might kick off the new year with kind of a back to the basics for folks that are like just starting to tune in or just, starting to, pivot, because not everybody is fully in the cloud native world yet. A lot of people are still making the change. So we're overdue. If you have ideas on that, also, I can do this. Email me.
Yeah. Yeah, email her. I don't know. It's over there for me.
That's not working.
Okay, that's not working.
If I could put a ball, you could do that.
Wouldn't it be cool if my hand did go through? Like,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway. So yeah, that said, long announcements, as was rightly called out in that comment, we do spend about the first 15 minutes of this stream just chit-chatting. Oh well, that's who we are. Especially me, that's who I am. So I guess that's enough delay. Christian, go for it.
Yeah, so I think last time we went over like scaling and sharding and things like that. And we talked a lot about monitoring. And so Hillary's like, kind of just like come back on and talk about monitoring, just in general for ArgoCD. So so I think that's a great topic, especially for those who are using ArgoCD, like the upstream version, right? I know OpenShift has OpenShift GitOps. So if you're an OpenShift customer, you're using OpenShift GitOps, and those metrics situation is automatically built for you, which is fantastic, because I'm going to show you actually how laborious it can be to set up like monitoring and stuff like that with open source tools. So if you're using OpenShift GitOps, maybe just hang out and laugh at the rest of us here who have to do this, because there's a lot of stuff built in to the ArgoCD UI. So the ArgoCD UI in general was built for developer experience in mind and for on-ramping people to Kubernetes. So a little backstory about ArgoCD and like where it came from. And it really, for me, just kind of like the story for me, it's it was really an early attempt at an IDP before we even thought of or came up with the concept of the internal developer platform, because the team at Applatix, who then got acquired by Intuit later, were basically helping Intuit transition everything to Kubernetes. But also at the same time, it was so early in the Kubernetes journey that like developers didn't even know how to even say Kubernetes, and that that's not to disparage developers. It's just because it was just so new, they didn't even know like concepts and things like that. So they didn't want to like teach primitives or teach Kubernetes. They want them to like focus on their code, but then also give them the tools to be able to like debug and to triage and just to kind of see status information about their application. So they did build ArgoCD from the ground up with the UI and UX in mind. And so to that end, there's a lot of information on the ArgoCD UI in general, but it's very application specific. So it's very, very app Kubernetes specific. So it's like, is my app running or not? Is it healthy or is it unhealthy? Things like that. You don't get information like, for example, you don't get information about like CPU utilization, or you don't get information about memory usage, or like whether or not you have like storage hotspots or anything like that, right? It's really application focused. Um, and so that's one, right? You don't really get any like infra information, right? So that's the kind of information more towards like the SRE, platform engineering, DevOps type
Yeah.
of people, the kind of stuff that Hilliary, like you care about, Hilliary, right? Like,
Yeah.
like it's like, hey, why is you get the calls like, why is my app degraded? You're like, I don't know. Let me take a look at the storage
Yeah.
system, because if you looked at because like, hey, I looked at all the stuff that developers care about, nothing looks awry. At that point, they don't know what to look at, right? And so I
Yeah.
think that kind of stuff is more important, like to like SREs. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And I actually cover this in the last couple times I've mentioned I'm writing a book with Andy Gabner and Max. I think you say his last name, Kopichar. It's very German, and I'm very bad at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, colleagues of mine from the Kubernetes community, and I actually literally wrote the chapter on why that is.
Yeah.
Which is the success of an IDP hinges on managing developer cognitive load, right? This is the environment you're creating where the developers need to do so much of their job, and you have to make that as easy for them as possible. So, everything that you're saying, like with the history of Argo, so forth, exactly aligns to what we know makes platform adoption successful. It has to be easy. I have to not need to think about it. I need to be able to stay in my lane and have something filtering out the rest of the noise for me. So yeah, from a developer perspective, it's really like, all right, I need to do these things to be successful. Like I have this golden path. I interact with it in this way and I get these outputs, and like that is what I can expect, right? It's all of the things around it, all of the minutia around it. That goes to like the SRE or the platform team. And I really want to let's talk about the SRE or platform team for a moment here, because
Yep.
even the industry, I feel like we can't really decide on what that means. But I will say this, right? You can have a platform team that is building out a platform and owns the reliability of the platform and responds to alerts and everything else like that. They may use SRE practices, but they're not necessarily SREs. You may see also SREs are like, okay, so you have the development team building the application, and then you have the SRE team that's responsible for the successful operations of that app on the platform, right? The platform is everything required to build and release your app and where your application runs, right? It's all of those things. And it's maybe one cluster. Bad idea, don't do it. It's probably multiple clusters, right? Yeah. Actually, it's probably multiple clusters all together, kind of creating that I don't know what word I wanted to use there, but you know what I mean. Creating the ecosystem. Thank you. That's the word, right? So you may have your SREs don't have any visibility into the platform beyond like certain measure. I also talked about how to federate Prometheus metrics so that the platform,
which is very important,
send information into so if the developer is monitoring their app and they have an SRE team that takes care of their app, then you can federate metrics in from the platform to the SRE's Prometheus so that they can get a more holistic picture. And that's what an SRE team would need to be successful. But they don't have to own the entire platform. They really shouldn't own the entire platform. They're not then you're just platform engineers with a pager.
Well, you said you had the shirt or the I'm not your sysadmin, right?
I'm not your sysadmin.
It's and a lot of people I think conflate the two, because I mean in a lot of organizations and smaller things like you said, you're just platform engineering with the pager, right? Or you're basically just DevOps but with more responsibilities. But in large organizations, or the way quote unquote it should be, is your SRE team is there to make sure the app is up and running and always available, right? Site reliability, right? They're almost like an extension of your developer release team, right? Like they're kind of in this, they are like in this weird, you're like in this weird gray area, because sometimes you're like, oh, that's not my, SRE. Like I don't have access to what the real problem is. I can tell you what the problem is, and then I'll pass that over to, someone who can switch a hard drive or something like that, right? Like it's really
the math went wrong in the storage reserve for the file system, and so now the app has crashed. And like, sorry, I can't fix that. Your app is in Java, and all of my skill set is not Java, right?
Yeah.
um
That's when Gerald comes, because Gerald knows Java. So like,
that's exactly what we get. We get the experts.
Yeah, we get the real expert. You get the nil pointer. Oh, I don't know. That's Gerald's code.
Yeah. Oh, that happens in the kernel too. Saw a few of those recently. So anyway, it's kind of, again, the industry has the industry still has some defined to do it. Like my concern for folks who are at a smaller organizations or even larger organizations, my concern for folks is don't let people push you into the trap of like what the full stack engineer was back in the LAMP stack days, where you had to know Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP and be able to do all of those, right? At
the same time, yeah.
At the same time. Whether you're a platform engineer, an SRE, or a developer, like try to avoid that trap. Like, don't try to be an expert in absolutely everything. Know it well enough to know who to go find, really. That's my career advice.
Yes.
Do with
sure.
that what you will.
What you will, yes, exactly.
But the important thing here, back to the very, back to, not only the beginning, but back a little bit, right, is that the SRE team might be supporting the platform, but they may only be another entity that uses it. And so the platform should enable them just the same way it does a developer.
Yes, exactly. And you have to think of it as enablement, right? Like, what's your how are you enabling these teams to do the best that they can, right? And providing that information. And then I could actually show you, we actually didn't test this, but let's see if I can share my screen. Window, entire screen. Let's do entire screen. How about that? See if, hold on, let me move this over here. Booyah. Right, so like this overview, so like if you're using Argo, let me make it a little bigger just for those of us, that is the opposite of bigger. For those of us with eyesight issues like me.
You could just get vision correction.
I could, but then that requires work. But then I'm just lazy at that point. So I have so here, like, in ArgoCD in general, like I said before, like you have information to like kind of like debug and kind of see information, but this is like specifically like Kubernetes type of information, right? And so like you can see logs, you can see like what's going on with like the pods. This one apparently has a back off restarting. So here it'll give you information to debug like Kubernetes specific type of things. So like if it's related to Kubernetes, you can just drop in and just fix it, like using the ArgoCD UI here. But there's for like and this is like developer focused, but like for like people like that are managing this, right? So now we're talking about like the Hillarys of the world, right? Or like the sysadmin, like the Johnnies of the world, need more information because they need information about the system. And like Hilliary was saying, like you were saying before, you may have like a lot of ArgoCD instances, right? You may have multiple ArgoCD instances across multiple environments, and like you don't really have an aggregated view. Like you'd have to like jump back and forth and like do all of that. And I don't think I'm saying anything that's the surprise to anyone, especially for those who have been here for a while. Been around in the industry for a while. That's the challenge, right? And I think collecting the metrics and aggregating them somewhere. I'm going to go through an example using Prometheus, but like it's the same. Doesn't matter. Datadog, New Relic, Dynatrace, OpenShift, right? Has their I think they still use OpenShift still uses Prometheus, but they don't use Grafana. If I remember, Gerald, if you're still on, please correct me. I think that's true, right?
Yes, OpenShift still uses Prometheus very much so. We actually did on like what ships with cluster, right? You can always do whatever you want. You can always add whatever you want, right? But on like what ships baseline, we did remove the Prometheus UI. it just was just not necessary, really. You people who are setting up their own monitoring they're running 2 copies of the UI to not use one of them. Not really helpful, honestly. Like, let's just go throw away compute for no reason with that. Not that it's heavyweight, but the point is, it wasn't necessary. The APIs are all available, and like people are federating stuff from the cluster into whatever they actually use.
Yeah.
And if you are using ACM, Advanced Cluster Manager, which is a Red Hat thing, then you do get Grafana with that as well. Or you can just install it from the operator hub, or install it with a Helm chart, or install it without any of those easy tools for reasons that I wouldn't understand. But you know,
exactly. Yeah.
You do you.
Yeah, you do you. And actually that actually takes me like interesting to the next point is that like how to enable. So there is actually, let me I'll put this in the chat and then you can paste it over. So there's this page on the Argo docs that kind of goes over like what kind of information the ArgoCD system exposes for you to scrape, right? For just in general, but you know, for Prometheus' sake, I think the industry, for the most part, is using like either Prometheus or like Dynatrace or like one of the bigger ones, right? So these are kind of like the endpoints and information that gets exposed that you can scrape for the information. But actually exposing, so they're not exposed by default. So that's one. And two, in order to expose them and enable them, you'd actually have to touch each individual controller and enable them either through a flag or through a config map update. And for example, like here, you'd have to add these flags here. And it's the same for like the API server, the repo server, like they each have their own thing. And then like once you expose them, you need to configure service monitors on the Prometheus side in order to tell Prometheus like where to scrape them, right? So like first you need to like expose those with ArgoCD, and that's like, you know, editing deployment files and adding flags and stuff like that. Or like I think some of them, or hopefully most of them, but but not all of them can be set in the config map, which isn't easy. So here it kind of just gives you an example, but it actually doesn't really tell you how to do that. And so in order to get this into Prometheus, what I've always done is, like I said before last stream, is like I just use the ArgoCD Helm chart. Again, shout out to those Helm chart, ArgoCD Helm chart maintainers. I may be biased, but I think it's like the best Helm chart I think I've ever used.
Oh, I was just looking at, you wouldn't believe how many Helm charts I have looked at over the last few days. You know, for the book research, as one does.
Yes.
And I went back to it. I absolutely went back to it multiple times as a reference, because it really is. It's easy to follow as well. Like if you're reading through, like it's very I love the way they did that. Yeah. It's well documented. I love the way they did that. Their actual like you know, like Argo workflows is a Helm chart, and like Argo rollouts is a Helm chart, right? So they actually have like individual sets of charts, so it's really easy to kind of follow what's happening for each aspect of the overall ArgoCD deployment. And then, you know, with that, it's I don't know, it just keeps it's so much easier to understand, right? Because like if you look at the custom resource definitions, which is really what I was looking for with this, if you look at the custom resource definitions, right, then you have the CRDs folder, and then, you know, if there's only 2 needed for one of those, then there's 2, right? So instead of like trying to like they could have done everything in one charts directory and like had it all smashed in there, and it would work. Yeah, probably, like it would work, but like they put some real care into like laying out all the relationships really nicely, keeping it really well organized. I'm sure it actually makes it a lot easier for them to maintain as well and keep it updated, because it's easy to find what you need. So like, I don't know, just like I said, I spent a lot of time going over those Helm charts last few days, and they're so good. They are so good,
and they're well maintained, and they are maintained not only by originally it was, I think I said this last stream, but originally it was like just like community only, but then it just got like sucked into like ArgoCD project proper, or the Argo project proper, and like there's folks from I know from Intuit is very involved. I know us at Acuity we're involved as well. People from GitHub, so like it's actually well maintained by actual companies that use it, and so I just use the Helm chart, right? And so to do a lot of the stuff here, one, a lot of the stuff here that you need to do, and two, a lot of stuff here is not even well documented anyway. By the way, like Hilliary always says, if you want to get into open source, helping with documentation is always welcome. It's always needed. And everyone will absolutely love you. So yeah, so like, yeah, so instead of here I'm probably talking about myself a little bit, but like instead of complaining about documentation not being right, how about you fix that documentation? I know I'm guilty of that too, because like we all get busy, but that's kind of like my thing on documentation. If you want to get into open source, documentation is one of the things that are really really needed. So
yeah, I was looking through old docs actually. I was looking through old docs, so they're not relevant anymore. But there was definitely some, you know, when you're reading it through brand new, not understanding the technology, there were definitely some things that I felt were made about like a context assumption.
Oh yeah. Yes, context assumption. I think it's a big thing.
It's a big thing.
Because upstream, and not to disparage any engineers, but upstream, when someone the first docs that get written are written by engineers, and that's not to do to be, I don't say that pejoratively, but like sometimes like you have a specific language you talk into, like when you're in a certain context in your head, right? Or like when you're like, you know, working on a system, like you have all this context that other people may or may not know. So it is very, very context specific sometimes, these documentation.
Yeah, and I was looking at it, I'm like, I was reading the episode, I'm like, I feel like there's a piece of information here that probably was documented in an older version, or by the time, you know, this version of this came around, was like kind of assumed to be well understood. That would make this make sense. But because I was doing a little mini research project on how Helm has changed between versions,
and
I didn't use Helm before Helm 3, I was not coming up with like what I needed in order to understand some of the aspects. So I actually just ended up abandoning that whole like train of thought. I was like, never mind. And keep in mind, we're going back from like Helm 2 was like Helm 3 came out in 2019.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So
back in the Tiller days,
back in the Tiller days, exactly. Yeah. So I was like going way back. It's hard to find good docs and examples from that long ago that would have helped me to build up the context. Yeah. So like I said, I just never mind, abandoned that train of thought, went a different direction with what I was doing, came out fine, I think. But yeah, you know, it's there definitely is. That was a real problem in the Helm 2 docs I was reading. It is much better in the current version of docs in Helm. I know that we're doing a lot better in a lot of the open source community because like so many people have rallied around these things. Yeah. But there's always something that you don't realize you know that informs the way you write your documentation. And it needs somebody coming in fresh, coming in cold, coming in who doesn't know anything to point it out. And that is like, if this is the only thing you ever do as an open source contributor, it is enabling everybody else in those same shoes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's like for posterity, right? Like you want to be able to like help future generations. Like if you ran into something and you figured it out, please document it. Like it's always helpful. There's actually a question in the chat. I'm actually going to answer it while we do this here. So that's kind of cool. That's a kind of cool segue for this question about like how to monitor the process, reconciliation process. I have a Kubernetes system here, but I don't have Prometheus installed. So again, shout out to the where is, I'm actually in the wrong directory. That would be Git. So I am this is actually part of my book, or me and Andrew Block's book. So you are getting a sneak peek here. Actually it's under Helm. So to install, here we go. Values file. To install Prometheus, I'm just going to install it from from the open source. So again, if you're using OpenShift, this does not apply to you. But if you're using open source Argo on Kubernetes, I'm going to install Prometheus. It's actually pretty straightforward because I'm installing Prometheus and I'm also installing. We provide a dashboard, and by way, I'm sorry, I mean the Argo project itself. So the Argo project, the ArgoCD team has a dashboard already. Like, just say, hey, just use this dashboard. So again, you don't have to think about it. It's probably straightforward. This Prometheus Helm chart here also provides the ability to install Grafana as well on top of that. So you actually don't have to install two things. So actually, I have my notes here. I actually forgot how to install it. I do a Helm upgrade. All right. Helm upgrade. Again, -I for install. Actually, make this a little bigger. Okay, so Helm upgrade. And then I'm gonna do. Actually, let me just copy and paste this. Maybe I'll do that. Save myself some headache. So Prometheus, and then values. All right, values. I want the Prometheus values, and then and the chart is the Prometheus community. Cool. All right, so that is installing. So I'll get Prometheus up and running. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how easy it is to open up the metrics ports, right? So the metrics for ArgoCD. And let's do get pods. Are we on? It's not up yet. Oh yeah, here it is. Get pods. I think I put it in the monitoring. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's coming up and running. And then let's do metrics. Okay, actually, let me put this. Let me do it in VI here. And so, so the question in the chat says, like how do you monitor like essentially like the sync process of ArgoCD, right? So the sync process in ArgoCD is made up of two components. The first is the repo server. So that's here. You can see that in line 16. I'm opening up the repo server's metrics server, metrics provider, and then I'm just going to annotate this, actually label this the same way I labeled the installation of Prometheus. So anyways, this is kind of how you, just like everything in Kubernetes, everything's a label. You build relationship between objects with labels. Like if they have the same label, they're related to each other, sort of thing, right? That's a very high level oversimplification, but just for the purpose of this talk, right? So you have the repo server. So I'm exposing those metrics, and that repo server is in charge of basically high level, again, oversimplification, doing a git clone, and basically either doing a git clone or doing the Helm, like the Helm repo add and update and that sort of thing. So like that's like a separation of concern. Like, so repo server is in charge of making sure you always have your desired state always cloned and available too. And this is not really intuitive, but line 9 is the controller, is what we call the application controller. Here it's shortened to application controller. And the application controller is in charge of actually applying those manifests that the repo server gets onto your target system, right? So you actually really need to kind of like monitor both to get kind of a clearer picture of what your sync status is and the metrics for your sync status, because it's made up two components. And then opening up basically every component, right? And so there's really no reason to not open every component. Like if you really want to get a holistic picture of ArgoCD and like the metrics available of what's happening on the system, you really want to monitor all systems, and it's really pretty much all the same. It's the same configuration, right? You basically say metrics enabled true, service monitor enabled true, basically open up the metric port. That's one. And two, create a service monitor, which I'll show you after this is done here. And then while I do that, how did I do this before? I always do this through GitOps, and like when I have to do things imperatively, I always have to look it up. So let's.
Hey, is this a kind cluster?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
You had to install the metric server, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay. That was one of the things. I found a really great gist on it yesterday. And it was like, I need to go comment on the gist because it was like a mixture of the provided Helm chart and somebody's one-liner. The one-liner didn't do it by itself. The Helm chart didn't do it by itself.
Yeah,
but when I combined those two things.
Yeah, exactly.
It was funny because it was like that was created forever ago. So like the back and forth on the comments, and someone was like, "Oh, this one-liner worked for me." You know, it was April of this year. I'm like, "All right, well, the one-liner doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
The Helm chart doesn't work with the There was a flag it passed. The flag didn't work. So it's like by their powers combined, though, my client cluster had a metric server like that.
Yeah, it's like Captain Planet, right? Or like
you
said, Sailor Moon side of thing, right? Like you need to combine all of them. So I'm doing a Helm upgrade. I think I mentioned this before, but like if you're using Helm and you're upgrading your Helm installation, make sure to use reuse values and then the values because order does matter. So that way you don't blow off any configurations that are already there. And so once I do that, it should kick me out actually from Argo because it'll have to recycle all the pods and do all the things. Yeah. So if I do 11 seconds ago. So actually, I think it's just a config change, so I don't think it needs to bounce anything. But let's see here if I'm still logged in. Nope, it kicked me out. Okay, cool. So then that's installed. This actually, let me just hard sync all of these just so we generate some info for the metrics server here. So then now so yeah, so if you have once I installed Prometheus, I installed Grafana and then I opened up the metrics ports. So let's take a look at let's just take a look at one. We don't have to look at deploy ArgoCD. And I think Gerald make a good point. If you are using OpenShift, all this stuff is out of the box. So I'm showing open source, but for the OpenShift GitOps, all that stuff's out of the box. Again, like I said, if you're using OpenShift GitOps, you can just sit back and laugh at all of us here, relax, or drink your tea, maybe as Hillary's doing. And here I do get.
It's actually a hazelnut hot chocolate with coffee.
Ooh. I think that's even better than tea. I don't know.
It's pretty good.
So let's get the deployment. Let's do the ArgoCD server. Let's do that in YAML. Let's less that. Metrics. Oops. Yeah, so here it added the metric port and be able to, and then I think exposes the endpoint. I think that's on a service. SVC, ArgoCD. So I added that. It also added server metrics. So it did actually add a service. So I added the metrics endpoint so that way it can scrape that information right from. So it's one, you have to like enable it right on that, but also you have to expose it via service so that way like Prometheus knows where to get it. And if you do get SVC, get service monitors, I didn't even know that's a CoreOS thing. Cool. Prometheus here. Yeah, so there's the ArgoCD. So these actually, the Helm chart actually also created this for you, right? Or else you'd have to create this manually. Again, shout out to that Helm team, Helm chart team, because you would have to create these manually and know like what endpoints and which selectors and things like that. So you'd have to create that for each component. But like I said before, I don't have to worry about that because someone else did that that headache for me, and I just have to just know these configurations, right? And so then I don't have again, this is an OpenShift, so I don't have a route to Grafana, but I have to do a port forward.
Yep. It's funny. I'm actually like following. I didn't have any of that installed on my local kind cluster either. So I was like, all right, while Christian's doing this, let me go.
Yeah, exactly.
Follow along. Why is Alert Manager still pending?
We don't know.
Not yours, mine.
Oh, okay. I think you are on call, so like you're doing SRE work on while doing streaming. You're like,
oh yeah, no, my
super SRE.
my backup came
Okay.
10 minutes in or whatever, so nothing happened. The pager gods were kind. Nothing happened, nice. And he arrived.
Yeah, so cool. So I did add to do a port forward, and like the default I set the password as prom operator. So that's what I was missing. I didn't know so this is the dash. So then part of the installation is I added this dashboard. If you want to take a look at it, you can, but it's just a bunch of JSON, as all things are, JSON or YAML. Let's see here. So if I click on dashboard, the ArgoCD one is here. These are the built-in ones from Prometheus and Grafana, the Grafana specifically, but we had to add this one. So that's what that Helm chart thing was, is to add that dashboard. So if you click on here, you have your ArgoCD dashboard here. And this has the information of like the sync status over a long period of time. I mean, this has only been up for like ArgoCD installation has only been up for like 45 minutes. So there's not a lot to show. But it shows you information about your applications, repositories, operations here. Looks like there's a little red here because, as you can see, one of my app is degraded. The controller stats have information. So all this information now is being scraped by Prometheus. And then I'm using Grafana to kind of visualize it. Let's do can I do the last 5 minutes intervals? At least give some data. And so here, this is the kind of like how long a reconciliation is taking, the performance of reconciliation, things, like all this. Oops, I don't want to delete that. All this telemetry information. So over a long period of time, and for like SREs and for DevOps type of people, this gives you like more insight. And as you add more and more ArgoCD installations, and here, like it says, if you go up, it has one cluster, right? But as you add clusters and you add ArgoCD installations, you can like kind of aggregate and kind of get a holistic view from like the Hillarys of the world, right? That want to have like a holistic view, like, yeah, like, not that we don't care, but we don't care about your app. We care about like the underlying like type of things that are affecting your app, right? So it's more of gives a bigger picture.
I always say somebody's app is not my business. It would be inappropriate for me to kind of cross over that line into being nosy about their app. What I care about is how their app is interacting with the platform. So, a thing that I would care about is, did your app suddenly go off the rails and start creating, I don't know, like 10,000 config maps?
Yes, exactly.
That's kind of a strange thing, right? If we were in a company,
Didn't you call me about that one time? I think it was a TechCon thing. Yeah, I think we debugged that. Yeah.
It was the bug. It was the jobs, right? The
jobs. Tecton.
Mm-hmm. I always say, like, my great open source contribution was to getting the Tecton team to implement auto pruning of old jobs by default and enabling and backporting that as an enablement to an earlier version. That is. You're welcomed, all Tecton users. Your control plane stopped falling over because I went and had conversations with the right people, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's a really good point. We'll fix that."
You got your pain. See, your pain helped others not to feel that pain, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's exactly what it was. ArgoCD, by the way, has been guilty of the same thing twice in my experience. Yeah. Twice, 2 different times. Yeah, the thing about that is, these Tecton jobs or these Argo jobs, they after they're finished, right, the history of them remains in etcd.
It's less of a Tecton. I was gonna say it's more of an etcd thing.
It's more of an etcd thing. Well, it's both, because it's the responsibility of the thing creating the object to set a time to live on it. right?
Yeah.
And so you have this time to live. This is like, how long do I want this to, this is a data retention policy, right? How long do I care about this? How long do I really need it around? I will tell you, you do not need a history of your CI jobs from all time. Probably the last 5 is okay. You could just say, depending on how frequently you do that, I don't know, like a week's worth or something is probably more than sufficient. You really don't need it beyond that. If you need information about that, like beyond that, export that information off the cluster and go put it into some like long-term storage, because etcd is not a database like that. It's just not.
Yeah, don't rely etcd for long-term metric data collection retention. Like no,
it's not a database.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not meant for that, right? It's not. So so one of the things I did want to call out is the repo server stats, and specifically here, get request ls remote. So if you notice the repo stats, this is like the highest one for my my little cluster that I installed here, and this is really the thing people notice first when wanting to tune ArgoCD. So I'm kind of like call back to last stream about like what to tune and when to tune it, is like, and the first thing people always have to tune is the get request, right? So as every 3 minutes by default, you can adjust that, but every 3 minutes, ArgoCD will go and check to see if there's any updates, and basically it just does we call it the get ls remote. And it's basically saying, has the hash changed since I last checked, right? And if it hasn't, then cool, it doesn't do anything. If it has, it'll do like a get get pull, right? Like again, I'm oversimplifying it, but it does a get pull to download like the latest, right, from your source of truth, from Git, essentially in this case. And if you have like a mono repo, or if you have like, this is essentially, it comes to head when you have a mono repo, meaning like one repository for your entire organization that has all the apps stored into it. One request can take a long time. It's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts, because like if you're refreshing one app, you're technically refreshing all apps. If you think with what you're doing, like even though like, hey, I just click refresh on this one app, why is the system starting to bug down? Well, you're really doing it on all. If you have like hundreds of thousands of applications, which some people do, and if in a mono repo, your get request. So that's when you start like saying, okay, I'm gonna have to start like scaling the get repo, maybe not use a mono repo, maybe do this and that. And so like even so, like if you notice, like even in my little small test system that I just set up 45 minutes ago, the largest consumer of things is the get ls remote, and just kind of like calling it back. If you haven't seen the last episode, it is on YouTube, so you rewatch that. But I did talk about like scaling these things, and like, well, you're gonna have to look at them. Now here we are, part 2. Now we're looking at them, right? And so then this is kind of when you start you have to use like the metrics in order to adjust and tune some of these things. Memory usage and things like that. So this is specific for the repo server. Memory usage has a lot correlating to how big your Git repo is. There's like essentially one. I see Luke is on, so maybe Luke can also attribute to that in his installation at New York Times. So.
Ooh, wow, we're really, really calling people out, who they are, where they work,
where they work. Yeah. Well, I want my Wordle answers. Like, where's the?
I did really good on today's Wordle. I got it in 3. I was really happy with that, especially because I ignore the Wordle bot and do what I want for the starting word. But anyway, let's actually talk about these charts for a second. I do see the question in the chat about how we can correlate ArgoCD events with other events in the Kubernetes environment. The answer is yes.
That's a you question, because you do that all the time.
Yeah. The answer is yes. But before we get to that slightly more advanced topic, I kind of want to just look at these charts, right? Because interpreting a chart is a little bit more art than science, I feel like. And let me explain why.
Yeah.
Why this is more art than science. And part of it is that, what might be a bad chart for one thing, and be indicative of a really big problem.
I like the sigh before you.
Yeah.
Before you sigh.
It is probably a potentially like totally fine set of chart trending, or like visual, like the way it visually looks out, probably totally fine for something else. So one, you have your memory used, right? And your memory used is climbing up pretty steadily, right? So that might be totally fine. That also might be an indication of a memory leak. And understanding when it's one versus the other is a little, like I said, it's a little bit more art than science.
I was gonna say it's a little bit art like cooking, right? Like, do I add more salt or do I? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where we might see I might see something like this, and I might go, okay, well, this is a really fresh deployment, so this is what I would expect to see.
Yeah.
I might know, okay, this just upgraded, so I would expect that all to go kind of high for a little bit, and then it will kind of normalize back down. So installations, upgrades, they use more memory and more CPU than like idle, or just normal runtime. Or there may be a process that runs every 3 minutes where I would see kind of some up downs. Those types of things, you have to get you have to have a concept of what is the behavior that would lead to these charts to look a certain way. And then it's also, okay, if the memory is really like steadily increasing, what's my CPU doing? Yeah. Because if there is a memory leak, your CPU is going to be going like crazy because it's going to be trying to reclaim any unused memory it can to compensate for this leak. So like I said, it's a little bit more art than science. Like there are some really like hard and fast things that you can look for, but also this might be fine. Like the memory may be significantly increasing, but we could be well within limits, in which case we don't need to worry about this trend. So this is where like we start getting into when creating alert thresholds and so forth, which can also be very personal because it'll depend on what else is happening on your cluster, what else you have running. What do you know about your environment and its behavior that would tell you, okay, this kind of a rapid thing will cause this other problem because of if this hits this much in this time, like it bursts in this way, then something else may also run a problem because I know it has a burst every 5 minutes. And so I would care about, those spikes in the resources, right? So interpreting these charts, like I said, a little bit more art than science.
Yeah.
There's just facts, but then there's also all of the things that are unique to your environment, the it depends aspects that mean whether or not that is actually of concern or not.
Do you think so? For me, the two biggest things, and you've been doing SRE work more recently than I have, but like to me, like context and sample size, I think are the two most important thing. Like data is great, but like you need right, but there's a difference between data and information, right? So like once you have the data there, all right, cool, you have this data, you have these charts. All right, when you're looking into something, what's the context and how big is your sample size? Because again, like this, I'm trending up, like the context is, I just did an installation. And also the sample size is only 40 minutes. So maybe I shouldn't react to this, right? Yeah. Just quite yet, right? Like maybe like I'm looking at it, but maybe not react to it.
Yes, and that's where the alert thresholds are, because it's a mixture of those two things, right? It's time and like current time, and then a look back amount. Like, has it been doing this for a concerning amount of time? And this is a little bit of like, okay, I know installations and upgrades use more memory and more CPU. So I would care about an increase, but I wouldn't care about the increase unless it lasted longer than X, 30 minutes.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Like the ArgoCD should upgrade within 30 minutes. Let's be real. That's probably like a very high time threshold, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's the logic that goes into it. So it's information and it's data. Exactly like you said. The information is like the things you know that go into your judgment call, and the data is the things you have learned that you're like splicing those two sets together. And like, I think you've got like, this is last 5 minutes or something up there, right?
Yeah, last 5 minutes. Yeah.
So
so maybe
that also, the trend lines may also, again, this is like a scale, like the 12 12 MIB to 24 MIB, that's not a significant change.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even
Because
though
the sample size and
Yeah.
it matters, right? Yeah.
Yeah. All of these things matter. So like what the lines look like
Yes.
is only scary if like what is on is that the x-axis?
Yes, the x-axis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if what is
right
on the
here.
x-axis is like really disparate values, like if that went from 12 to 2400, right?
That's versus
that's
12
concerning.
to 10 mega. This is a 10 megabyte jump, so it's like, oh, okay, that's not whatever.
That's fine. that's probably
baby,
it's baby. Especially because we like just started tracking this stuff too, so we don't actually have a real history.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all that, and then so that kind of and there's a couple great things happening in the chat, and we don't have room for all of them, right?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so correlating ArgoCD events with other events in your Kubernetes environment. So yes, the thing about something like Grafana is that it can have multiple data sources, right?
Yes.
So it could just do like the cluster Prometheus. If you have a couple different Prometheus instances running, then you can kind of get all of them into one Grafana. If you have something backed with a database, for example, because you want much longer term metric sets, then you might want to be keeping on a persistent storage, persistent volume on a cluster, right? It can hook up to that too. So you start getting it connected to all of the data sources that paint the picture, right?
That paint the bigger picture, context, right?
That the landscape view of everything, and then you can start actually like you may take one of these pre-built little chips and just be like, I'm going to copy this chip and I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to get this other chip and I'm going to put it there, and you can start like just you can write a bunch of custom stuff, but you can also take the stuff that already exists that needs to be evaluated together and just like putting them literally side by side in the Grafana view.
And I recommend just going with the default at first, because this Grafana dashboard, JSON, is basically something that Intuit provided. So it's basically what they care about, and I think it's a good starting point. But you're right, maybe you care about other things, right? Versus like that may not matter, and like you said, you start building your own little dashboard. Essentially, you can start building these custom dashboards. Especially if you're going to, like you said, what do you call it? Aggregate, right? Like aggregate the data and stuff like that. Then, what you care about may change.
Yeah. So, if one of these, like GitOps remote performances is really, really like low, laggy, maybe. I don't know the exact way this is measured, truthfully. So this may not be a technically accurate example. However, if you're seeing like some performance degradation in some of these things that actually have to reach out off cluster, a good thing to also look at may be your API server health, right?
Yeah.
Your API server, or it could be overloaded, or if you've got something in your networks, if you've got network observability implemented, that may be showing some problems. So, kind of to help you understand where the real issue could be if this hits some sort of concerning number, or some kind of like concerning threshold, then you might want to like have kind of like something that tells you just about like network
more
traffic.
information. Yeah. Outside of like the preview of like ArgoCD and ArgoCD.
Next episode, building ArgoCD SLOs and
SLIs.
Oh, that's a really good topic.
Andreas, you should get Andreas on there.
Right?
He loves that type of conversation.
He really, he's good, and he's good at it. I mean, not that I don't, but yeah. I will say I actually do have. We are at time, Christian. I don't know if we made it through even half of your.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come back on again.
I know, right? You got to do this again. So we could do that. Truthfully, I actually have episodes all the way through October lined up right now.
Nice.
I'm pretty excited about some of them. Some pretty neat tools. I didn't expect this one to get so much. I mean, I kind of always expect a lot of engagement when Christian's here, but I didn't quite expect this much engagement on the topic, so that we wouldn't even get all the way through his demo. But I'll talk about it. Maybe we bring Christian back. Maybe we bring Andreas. We'll see what
Andreas would be nice. Yeah.
He would be nice, but the problem is that he may be at KubeCon. You might actually be at KubeCon.
I'll be at KubeCon. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I will not be at KubeCon. Please, everybody, have a great time for me. It is my child's birthday. I will be home for my child's birthday because I like my child.
Yes, yeah.
And also,
well,
he would never let me forget it if I missed.
what would be kind of interesting, and I know we're at time. Maybe this is a topic for something else. Yeah, I did go over in I'm doing like a book tour. I did go over alerting in my book tour, but like I actually didn't use Prometheus rules for alerting. I've actually just used the Argo um, application alerting mechanism. But this goes back to the SRE conversation. That may not be that may be a part of of a bigger problem. So yeah, like other information from Prometheus rules for alerting is it's something I actually haven't researched, but like that's important. And I'm pretty sure Hilliary has has stories about like the alerting and pager and what to alerting might be a good topic as well, just in general, like with GitOps and ArgoCD.
Yeah, alerting for GitOps, it can be done with Prometheus. I mean, you can do, this is the question that we're referencing, by the way, by the way, I turned off our name chips. It took me like several times to try it, so people may have seen me like fussing around with that a little bit. It was really annoying that like the bottom of your screen was covered by the name chip, and our like bottoms of our chins were cut off. It was terrible.
It was weird.
I should bring the kid to meet. Oh God, he would love it if I took him on a trip. You have no idea. But he would also be a nightmare. So not yet. Maybe he's a little older. Right. Yeah, we could do it. If people are interested, okay, fine. We'll come back to it. It's not going to be before October though.
Yeah, no, it'll be after KubeCon. Maybe if you're at KubeCon, maybe we can just sit around and chat about it and come up with the episode together. So
yeah. So let me know who decides they want to do it. Who like just tell me you want to be the tribute to come on the stream and do it. If no one volunteers, I will do it, but I won't be happy about it.
Oh, there you go.
This is my opportunity to not work very hard. This is my fun thing. Don't make me work that hard, guys.
Yeah, and also hopefully Johnny's back, because I wore his shirt for him, but he's not here. So
yeah, he's not here. He's off meeting with customers and being a real business person.
Actual work. Wow.
I know, right? Real work. Speaking of real work, I need to go actually take over the pager from my backup person. It has exceeded the time in which he committed to it, so I should go be a responsible team lead and take my pager shift.
Responsible SRE, yes, for sure.
SRE. Look, folks. Next week we have some other Red Hatters coming on to talk about, I don't even remember. I'm terrible. I'll post it on LinkedIn though. Can't even think about it right now. Yeah, we have, we'll have some other Red Hatters coming on talking about like DevOps and GitOpsy things, and kind of like a bit of an industry status type of a deal. And then a couple episodes after that are also planned. I'm excited. OC Mirror, we're going to revisit that. They've done a re-architecture. We have an AI episode coming up. That's pretty cool. So, while we will go back to observability and SLOs for ArgoCD, it's just, I've got some other really neat stuff lined up first that we got to get through. And these guests have so graciously dedicated and promised their time. So I'm not rescheduling them.
Yes.
I'm always here. We can do things whenever. Otherwise, like I said, you want to come on the show, you have a topic, your talk doesn't get accepted for whatever reason to ArgoCon, please let me know. I'd love to have you. Until then, choose your technical debt wisely, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Cheers.